I am standing once again at the Volkov, and that means now we are going shopping again. And in this video, it is all about every item you can buy for the mid-game. So in this video, we take a detailed look at what you should ideally already be saving for in the mid-game, so that you can fish with this setup for as long and as effectively as possible, in as many situations as possible, on as many waters as possible, so that you can save enough silver on this long journey for the in-game setup, because that will get really expensive again. And in this video, we look at all fishing styles so that players who do not want to specialize can pick exactly the right reels and rods so they can use everything as true all-round anglers. So starting with float fishing, meaning which telescopic rod, which Bolognese rod, or even which match rod we are using. And all the way to spinning, meaning which rods and reels are suitable in the mid-game for spin fishing. And third comes, of course, the big question about bottom fishing. So, which rods and reels should you ideally buy in the mid-game for bottom fishing and for carp fishing? So let's start with float fishing. And for that, of course, we go first here at the Volkov into the shop. Why the shop here at the Volkov? That is explained in the basic tutorials about the shops. If you have not done that yet, you are simply missing the basic knowledge of the game. And in the shop, we now go to fishing rods, go to telescopic rods, and scroll a bit further down here to the Model 1 T700. With this telescopic rod, you have, as a float angler, an excellent mid-class telescopic rod with a breaking strength of 11 kilograms. And the rod is even priced under 1,000 silver, which means, again, for roughly 3,000 silver, you are already completely ready for the mid-game as a float angler. And with this rod, you can also fish for things like bream or tench. So fish that weigh around 4 or 5 kilograms can also be caught very easily with such a rod. And because this rod is also 7 meters long, you have a very good opportunity to fish at Balaya for grayling, chub, or brown trout. And if you, as a float angler, do not necessarily want to continue fishing with the telescopic rod, but would rather switch to a Bolognese rod, then this is exactly the right level phase for it. For that, we look under Bolognese rods, scroll a little further down to the ethnic Bolognese, and here you choose the 8-meter Bolognese. So the huge advantage with this rod is you get 14 kilograms of breaking strength for 2,000 silver. And with the matching reel in combination, you can already fish very well and very comfortably for larger carp. And especially if you want to do float fishing at Copper Lake, for example, for the koi carp, then this would already be a really good start. Because at Copper Lake, you are also very restricted with float fishing, meaning you cannot use big, heavy match rods for carp fishing. Therefore, you can actually fish very well at Copper Lake with such a Bolognese rod. And for the Bolognese rod, we now need a matching reel. And for that, we go up here to fishing reels, spinning reels, scroll down again to around the middle, and we see here the Beluga Narga, a tension important in the 6,000 version. The 8,000 reel also looks good, of course, but again we have a restriction in the game at Copper Lake because we are allowed to fish there with a maximum 6,000 reel, and therefore this reel is extremely well suited. This reel costs under 2,000 silver, and theoretically you can already buy it under level 20. So if you have saved well even before level 20, so that you always have your goal in mind, you can of course already buy such a reel before level 20 and start fishing with it. And if you have pulled through with float fishing from level 1 to level 20 and have done almost nothing else, it is absolutely possible that you may already be around 60% in the float fishing skill. And that gives you the ability to use match rods. Match rods in float fishing are something like the carp rods for bottom anglers, meaning heavy rods with strong breaking strength and ideally suited for fishing for larger fish. Additionally, with the match setup, you can also use waggler floats, which you can see extremely well even at great distances. But even there, as I just said, there are restrictions at Copper Lake. At Copper Lake, you can use at maximum a medium light match rod. And on a medium light match rod, you are allowed to use again at maximum a 3000 reel. Such specific setups with such restrictions are simply hard to afford for beginning anglers. You now need a setup in this level phase that lets you do as much as possible. So my recommendation is therefore, go for the Bolognese setup at the beginning. If you still want to buy a mid-class match rod, I will show you two models. For that, we of course look under fishing rods, under match rods, and then we go down here to the elementary and here to the second version, meaning the slightly longer version of the match rod. This rod is also available from level 20. You have a very good price to performance ratio here, and with this rod you can also use the reel just presented very well. And if you want to spend even more silver, then take a look at the Inventor Match. Huge advantage with the Inventor Match, you get an additional plus 5% on float fishing, which means again that you can already use this match rod at 55% in the float fishing skill. So you have 55% in float fishing. Normally the match rod unlocks at 60%, but because you have plus 5% on the rod, you already have the 60% when using this rod. This also means that you unlock the double bait setup 5% faster, meaning the setup type where, for example, in float fishing, you could combine a worm and a potato. So this match rod is also an absolute recommendation, and you can still use this match rod quite well later on, even all the way into the end game. And with these rods and reels presented, as a float angler or as an all-round angler, you now have the possibility to use these rods and reels excellently, even up to level 30 plus. And these rods and reels still have their value in the end game, even if you eventually buy a much bigger setup. What you buy in the end game, I will show that in the following video called What to Buy in the End Game. So do not forget, leave a like, subscribe to the channel so you do not miss this important video. Next, let's move on to spin fishing. As a spin fisher, it is also recommended to buy a stronger reel and a stronger spinning rod in the mid-game. And why, as spin fishers, we are still focusing on spinning in the mid-game and not on baitcast. I will also explain that in this video. So, why we stay with spinning and why we buy no baitcast in low level and also now in mid level, we will look at that in detail in a moment. So let's go to the shop. And here we also look at which rods and reels are worth it when you are somewhere around level 20. With this setup, so the setup around level 20, with this setup, the goal is that you have the option to troll, that you have the option to fish for pike, and ideally you can already use this setup towards the end game for salmon fishing. So now we look for a setup that has the perfect properties: casting weight, breaking strength, and the power of the spinning rods is also very important. We first go to fishing rods, then down to spin rods, and here we choose the Karma Mector S version. And there is a very large selection of different rods. But what we want, we already see here in this section. We want a very good casting weight, a casting weight that starts quite low and still goes up, like in this case, even up to 30 grams, which means again that you can cast lures very well in this weight range, and that covers an enormous number of different lures. Additionally, it is important that we make sure in spinning that we have enough power on the rod. If you bought a rod where the power is under 5, then later on, when using wobblers or topwater lures, you will not reach the correct retrieve method. So pay attention that you have enough power on your rod. And as the third component, we also have a breaking strength of 20 kilograms here. And with this breaking strength, and with the reel that I will show you in a moment, you have the possibility to catch all fish in the mid-game without any problems. And another advantage of this rod is, of course, that you could theoretically use it already from level 14, and it costs under 1,000 silver. So the price to performance ratio here is really good, and you can still use this rod very well later on, even at the Yama for salmon fishing. So let us now look for the matching reel for this rod. We go back to spinning reels, and here we look at two reels. One option would again be the Narga 6000. This reel is also definitely a good option for spin fishing. However, it is a bit slow. That is still okay. You can manage quite well with it, but a bit more speed would not be bad. If you want to go a bit cheaper, you can certainly use this reel well. And if at some point you realize that you want to try something else, you have still bought a very good reel that you can also use for other fishing styles. A step up would then be the Natura 6000. It is more than 1,000 silver, more expensive than the Narga, but it is a bit faster and of course also has more brake power. So this reel is also a really good option, and you can use it in many areas for the other fishing styles as well. Basically, you can say that for spin fishing, 6,000 or 8,000 reels are always a good choice, because the size of the spool head, whether it is a 6,000 and 8,000 or a 10,000 reel, the size of the spool head determines how far you can cast a lure. That is why 6,000 reels are worth it in the spinning area. You can cast very far, still have very good brake power, and enough line capacity. Yes, and actually that is already it. In theory, this one rod and this one reel are enough, and you can already do almost everything in the spinning area. Compared to the other fishing styles, it is clearly much less that you have to buy, but it might also limit you a bit because you are simply not as successful in trolling with only one rod. So a second setup would definitely be an option. That means we go again under fishing rods, again under spin rods, and now we basically need a rod that is a meaningful addition to what we already have as spin anglers. So ideally, as a spin angler, you have your Belaya setup, the setup that is excellent for fishing at the Belaya, perfect for using very small lures. Then comes the Karma Mector, which is good for medium weight lures and also ideal for later salmon fishing at the Yama. And then what is missing is another step up that has even more power, the Super Duty S88XH. This rod costs under 1,700 silver. Additionally, you must of course consider that you will have to buy another reel. Still, with such a setup, you will manage very, very well and for a long time. Or you can use this rod explicitly for pike fishing. Or if you want to use extra heavy lures, you can also do that with such a rod, because here the casting weight is even higher. The Karma Mector for the mid-game has a casting weight up to 30 grams, and this rod has a casting weight from 25 to 100 grams. So with this rod, you have the perfect addition to use even more different lures. With such a setup, I once caught my first big catfish at the Sura, weighing over 80 kilograms. So even such a rod is definitely suitable for very big fish. But why do I recommend no baitcast at the beginning? Only spinning. Spinning reels and rods have a much better price to performance ratio, especially in the early game. You get the same brake power and braking strength for far less silver. Additionally, the wear values are also lower, so you have to repair less. And on top of that, baitcast reels also have an extra casting weight requirement. We will also look at that in detail in a moment. And all of that leads to baitcast simply not being worth it in the early game. But from when does baitcast become worth it? Baitcast becomes worth it in the extremes. In the extremely light range and in the extremely heavy range. In these two extremes, a baitcast setup is worth it. So especially in the ultralight range, a baitcast rod is worth it. And the same applies in the very heavy range, if you want to fish for catfish, or of course later also at the North Sea. There, these round profile or conventional reels, so baitcast reels, are worth it. And both of these cases are things you can only afford in the end game. Especially the ultralight setups in the low and mid-level have very poor characteristics and are disproportionately expensive. Additionally, they have extremely high repair needs. And that is also the reason why in the beginner spinning video, I already built the Belaya setup like this, so that you have a setup under 1,000 silver with the perfect characteristics, both in casting weight, in brake power, and in line capacity. And for under 1,000 silver, we do not even get a reel with a good casting weight for light or ultralight fishing. From this reel, it starts to become somewhat interesting, but even 5 grams are not attractive. With the Thunderbolt reel for 1,700 silver, which is 1,000 silver above the complete Balaya setup, there we have a casting weight of 3.6 grams, which is worth it. So if you were to buy a reel with a casting weight of 5 grams, you could cast a 4-gram spinner only very poorly. That is the reason why baitcast and especially ultralight fishing is simply not worth it in the early game. And that is probably also one of the reasons why RF4 integrated a new setup or new different sets. But that too is something more for the end game when you have enough silver available. The Alpha Caster series, for example, offers 3 options: ultralight, light fishing, and medium light fishing, and at a really good price. Additionally, you can also choose which color you would like your setup to have. And for an ultralight rod, you can then also buy the new Skipper low profile reel. It has a casting weight starting from 2.8 grams, which is also worth it. But as you can imagine, this too is something more for the end game, and we will look at that in the upcoming video about spinning in the end game. Yes, now it really gets wild, because now it is about bottom fishing, or about the very first steps for carp anglers in Russian fishing for. So, what do you buy now? Because Copper Lake has been added, we really have to rethink things a little. And the old approach, that you just save for a very long time for an 8,000 caliber HSV, then buy your carp setup, and with that you are set all the way to the end game. This approach needs to be reconsidered. Because at Copper Lake, we can neither use the 8,000 reel nor the carp rod. And at Copper Lake, you progress extremely well in experience points and in silver when you are having fun bottom fishing. So that means, as a beginner, you have ideally bought the feeder set start 3 times, and with that, you start saving. Spend as little silver as possible. Skill your ground bait mixing only a little, but make sure that you have saved up as much silver as possible by level 20 so that you can then buy your mid-game setup. And your new mid-game setup ideally looks like this. You buy 1 strong feeder rod and 1 matching 6,000 reel. Let's take a detailed look in the shop. So we go to the rods, we go down here to feeder rods, and of course, there is a wide selection. And the most important thing is, you cannot really do much wrong. Even if you might already have bought something different, something other than what I will recommend in a moment, it is usually not that bad, as long as the values are not too far from what I show. So if you already have a setup that is similarly good as what I present, then start saving your silver now for what I will recommend in the endgame video. Try to make as large a jump as possible from your current setup to the next stronger setup. So, there are many rods that are really good and that already have enough load capacity, or are even a bit cheaper than the one I show. But despite all that, I currently recommend the Karma Mector FD 440. The advantage of this rod is, first, an extra hard blank, so you can put real pressure on a hard fighting carp, a magnificent casting weight, 25 kilograms load capacity, and the price, you get all of that for 850 silver. So that is almost unbeatable. Very, very good properties on this rod. And with this rod, you can fish extremely well for a very long time. You can also later use this rod for fishing at Bear Lake or at Amber Lake. So with this, you really have the chance to catch very large carp already. And the most important thing is that we start cheaply, so as cheaply as possible getting into this mid-game setup, and that is exactly what this setup offers. This rod, for example, you can already buy at level 14, and then if we look under spinning reels, I recommend also here the Narga 6000. It costs under 2,000 silver. It has a very nice slow gear ratio so that you have a lot of power in the retrieve. And with 13.6 kilograms braking force, you can make full use of the power of the rod. If you are unsure about how to correctly assemble your setup, definitely check the playlist for the basics. There is a separate video about how to assemble your setup properly. So this setup gives you the possibility to already have a suitable carp setup at level 18, for example for Bear Lake. And purely in terms of price performance, we have a complete setup for under 2,800 silver. These 2,800 silver used to be the price of the caliber HSV alone, meaning you now get into carp fishing significantly faster and significantly cheaper. Are there alternatives to this reel? Yes, absolutely. I have tested several reels, but keep in mind, as a carp angler, you always want a 6,000 reel because our setup is now limited by Copper Lake. If you want to fish for koi carp, you can use one feeder rod at maximum. So that is why I recommend this feeder rod, and you can use one 6,000 reel at maximum. Therefore, the recommendation for this 6,000 reel. If you are already at a higher level and already have a reasonable carp setup, maybe even carp rods, and you still want to buy something ideal for Copper Lake, then of course you do not buy this beginner 6,000 reel. Instead, you will already have a setup that continuously generates silver so that you can buy a higher quality reel. These higher quality 6,000 reels we will now also compare. Should you buy cheaper than that? Rather not. Even though it is nearly 2,000 silver, it is still worth saving longer for it. Something like the Siberia Gold is ultimately less worthwhile. Even if it is a bit cheaper and similar in values, the Narga 6000 simply has better quality, just from the manufacturer. And additionally, you can repair the Narga reel in the Beluga shop. That makes repairs 25% cheaper. So for fishing at Copper Lake, we have our feeder rod, in this case the Karma Mector. Additionally, ideally, we do not want something like the 6,000 Gold. If you have something like that, use it. Do not buy a Narga just because of that. Earn your first silver at Copper Lake if you are already in that level phase, and earn additional silver so that you can buy a much higher quality reel for Copper Lake. For starting the mid-game, the Narga 6000 is worth it. The price-performance ratio is simply great. And the most important point is, you have to realistically farm that much silver at the beginning. If you do not have trouble farming silver, you can also buy the Natura 6000. And you can also buy these 5 reels for fishing at Copper Lake. And with these 5 reels, you are very well equipped at Copper Lake. You see that all these reels are similarly good in breaking force, between 17 and 20 kilograms. But you have a huge difference in price between 5,000 and 10,000 silver. And just as important is the gear ratio. A slow reel simply pulls fish in with more power, while a faster reel tends to spin through more easily when the fish fights back. So if you are already at Copper Lake or just about to get there, and you already have enough silver, or the ability to generate enough silver with a good setup, then go ahead and buy one of these higher quality reels for Copper Lake. Or just go all in and buy the Venga 6000. Then you have the maximum breaking force and power for Copper Lake. Yes, and how bottom fishing continues afterwards. That will be the topic of the next video. Bottom fishing in the end game and carp fishing in the end game. Despite all that, you also need further tools in the mid game. For example, it is worth buying food now and then so that you always regenerate energy. The cheapest food is enough, because even that fills your hunger bar. Meaning, if you simply take carrots, eat 3 pieces, your hunger bar will be boosted nicely, and all that for around 1 silver. That is manageable, but we also need further tools in the tool shop. Ideally, you already bought the shovel in the early game. Then at some point you should buy the fillet knife for crafting fish pieces and slowly start saving for the bait bucket for crafting bait fish. Tools, however, always come second. Meaning, never prioritize ground bait mixing or tools or food over a new setup. With bait fish, you do not earn new silver. If you make 2,000 T, you just waste silver and do not earn new silver. So priority number 1 is always new rods, new reels, and only when something is left, then tools or skilling. In the course of the mid-game, you will also need the ladle. then you will surely want to craft your own leaders. There will be a separate video about that. And for crafting high-quality ground bait, you will later also need the grinder to crush boilies. So the rule stays the same. Save as long as possible, buy very selectively and very little, but buy in a way that lets you use your setup very long so that you can afford better rods and reels in the end game. And all specialization into specific fishing styles or specific fish species that only comes after the end game. So at the beginning, always buy so that you can use your setup for as many fish and fishing styles as possible. If this helped you, leave a thumbs up. That helps me a lot. Subscribe to the channel, helps even more. And then we will see each other in the next video or sometimes in the live stream. Until then, tight lines.